I'll hit the record
So
here.
with the recording, do you want a recording of both of us, or how do we do this?
Yeah, do you want I think for just to be safe, I'd love that.
Yeah.
But then I have to is it something about I have to allow it to happen somewhere?
Yeah, if perhaps if you put gallery view, then the photo picture won't be changing all the time.
Yeah.
Instead of speaker view, you have gallery view.
Oh, so this is the gallery view. This is perfect, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you're also all set, I'll bring in the Pleiadians, and then you just take it from there and have a good time. See you.
Thanks. You too.
Hello, Hogne. A joyous and prosperous day to you.
Thank you very much. How are you doing today?
We are doing well. You can. My name is Danver of the Pleiadians. I am, to be more specific, our race is also known as the Nordic Pleiadians. Another name for us that would resonate in your tongue with our frequency would be Astral, or the Astral. But today we would like to offer information on any particular subject that you would want to ask to. My name as a representative of my species is Danver of the Nordic Pleiadians.
Wonderful. So first, we could actually start with elaborating a bit what you mean with the Nordic Pleiadians.
Yes, this is perhaps there are different perspectives to further inform you on this. One is our physiognomy is similar to that, as stereotypically Scandinavian. So, and more akin to the almost comic book like version of Scandinavian. So we are quite tall. We are usually ranging between 2.5 meters to 2.8 meters in height. We are also quite, say, densely structured, muscular in that sense. So we have this appearance of almost the Nazi vision of the Aryan Superman, although we don't attach any of these political values to it. The reason we are similar in appearance to the Nordic physiognomy is because our star, the star Alcyone of the Pleiadian constellation, has this very blue-white light, and simply it has also been convenient for our race to develop a type of skin and physiognomy similar to it. But were you to experience us in our own density, in our own race, there would also be notable differences. For instance, we have gill-like structures on our skin or faces that humans normally don't perceive because you are unaware of these type of organs, but we use them to dilute some of the more methane-rich atmosphere on our own planet. So that is one aspect. And another is we are also very much connected to the region of the Baltic in particular, where we have interacted with different indigenous species during the past 170,000 years or so. We can inform you more on this if you wish.
I think that's a good for an introduction.
Yes.
We might see if there's a way we can cross back into that.
Everything flows naturally, yes.
Yeah. So today we wanted to make a video recording about Scandinavia, especially the Viking era.
Yes.
And also the energy vortices here in Scandinavia. So that's not much spoken about. So first I thought we could just start with an overview of the Viking era from your perspective.
Yes. Understand, which we know that you humans also understand, that eras are not set in stone, they are set in paper, so to speak. That is to say, these are convenient ways to limit off certain themes and experiences and developments in your societies or cultures or personal lives. So in that perspective, we see the Viking Age much as a culmination where Scandinavia and the energies of these lands begin to finally merge and integrate with the rest of the planet. For a long, long time preceding it, in the areas of Scandinavia, many indigenous people grew from the land, and then they set out to migrate into different areas. Some migrated into the Eastern European areas and became integrated with the Slavic populations there, but others went marauding in the empire to the south. And so the Viking era becomes more of a distinct era because it is a culmination aesthetically and we would say thematically of the certain ethos or perception, self-perception, moral and cultural self-perception of the Scandinavian peoples that grew out of the migration era and then made them a very distinct culture. We would say, for instance, that the longboats are of course much connected to the Viking era, but the longboats were simply the final expression of the vision of the, let us say, flexible, dexterous warrior, the mercurial warrior, the one who is able to adapt to many situations, but is still unshaken and very self-controlled and self-possessed in the values he holds and his moral fortitude. And this is very much expressed in the character of Odin, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So could you tell me a bit more about the Norse gods? So there's a lot of them. And were some of them actual incarnated entities? Or are they more archetypes, like in many other cultures?
Yes, this is an excellent question. But yes, many of them are archetypes, but we would say incarnated archetypes. What often happened was that these figures fed into each other. That is to say that at some point, a warrior king may have given rise to some certain fundamental ways of perceiving a certain deity. So, for instance, there was a king in the lands of the Westfold, known as Röfnar, who in the 600s held a type of court in which many local Scandinavian warriors were attracted to compete in feats of strength. And this inspired some of the later traditions and details of Valhalla as you know it, as it comes down to you from, in particular, Snorri Sturlason. So this is an example where a king behaved in a certain way and that rubbed off on mythology. But we would, yes, perhaps surprise many of you to say that deities actually incarnate and walk among you. This is, for instance, in your Indian culture, a very common principle in the notion of the avatar. The idea that some forces in the universe are so strong and they are so necessary in the way they unfold that they will incarnate purely, almost purely in a human body, but actually as a divine figure. And so this happened to, for instance, the figure, the god of Heimdall, would incarnate in different areas at different times, but he would also always serve a type of helper function, be a champion of sorts when it was needed in dire situations for people he held dear. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Anything else there, or should we
Oh
move
yes,
on?
yes. Oh yes. We are happy that you brought us along. We could talk and talk for hours, but we also feel the need to make sure that that you are picking up on our intentions.
Yeah.
But yes, there is much to say about the Norse pantheon, because there are, as you say, many gods. The gods most widely celebrated were perhaps also the gods most likely to incarnate. So these are the main popular gods, those of Frey and Freya. Also, of course, Odin, Thor, and we have already mentioned Heimdall. Also, Frigg would often be called upon in situations of what's the word? Yes, women giving birth, or in situations of labor, she would be called upon as a midwife, and she would often appear, as the wanderer's wife, the lady with the dark hair in the night, seeking your door to appear with remedies of help and to ease your pains in time of need. Yes, we sense in a way, if we may address you personally, that this energy of Frigg is in a sense reaching out to you in a very benevolent way. We sense there is it is in a way connected to you. We would say your paternal grandmother, so your father's mother. We sense there is a love from her connected to the figure of Frigg, which is reaching out to you and just wants to let you know that she's happy that you are also opening up to like the feminine wonder of the world. So this is an integrating process for many individuals and males in particular in this time of the world, that the male and the female are becoming integrated in our perception of ourselves, and that is very healthy. Yes.
Well, coming from the Nordics myself, there's so much of the stories, you know, they're very fragmented. So the amount of information compared to in other religions like Christianity, a lot of the culture that we had, a lot of it is not accessible in the written form.
And that is true. That is true. But realize even then it was a religion and a tradition of the tongue.
Yeah.
And if you go to the landscapes, and especially in Norway, and we would say also in the central parts of Sweden, but mainly in Norway, the land is so very, very laden with strong energies, and they have been very much undisturbed by the changing processes of civilization that has undergone that the relatively small population of Norway has undergone. So if you go out into nature, which we know is a very, very common pastime, the Norwegians are people who live almost symbiotically with the modern world and the natural world. These energies are still feeding into you, and the information is available. And we would say, for instance, in your case in particular, all you would need to do is simply to go out there and shut your eyes and trust the information that is coming to you, because your connection to the land is also very, very strong generationally. Yes.
So that brings us to the next topic.
Yes.
So the energy vortices that's in Scandinavia. I've heard, for example, there's one in Jotunheimen in Norway.
Yes.
But I haven't heard any other information about if there is certain vortices that's active in Scandinavia. Could you tell me a bit more about that? And I have another question as well regarding that.
Yes, that is a very good question, and we will give you both some general and some specific information. The general information is that this is a very strong and spiritual landscape, the Scandinavian peninsula in particular. When you Denmark is different in that sense, but it is still a very wild country for most of its history, and many of the Baltic Isles in particular hold some of that we would say special Scandinavian magic. But in the Scandinavian peninsula in general, you are right. There is a center. There is actually, you can consider the whole ridge of the Scandinavian mountains as a type of spine of this energetic body of the peninsula. And it is interesting because it is reversed in this case. So you would think that from south to north, you would progress from the root chakra energy of, for instance, the Oslo area. But that is not the case. The root chakra of the Scandinavian peninsula is located almost at the North Pole, at the Svalbard region. Svalbard constitutes this type of raw natural energy that is feeding the landscape. And so in this perspective, there is a lot of minor energy vortices proceeding down the Scandinavian ridge and also down the coastlines of the peninsula in both directions. But the major ones are, for instance, the one you mentioned at Jotunheimer. And this is because this constitutes, we would say, actually the fifth chakra energy. So this is the expressive blue energy. And this is why this is very much a region that is calling out to the people who live close to it, and is drawing attention because it so much expresses the energy of the entire peninsula there. But there's actually, we would say, almost a deeper energy or a different energy located closer to, we believe the region is called Telemarken, perhaps, where the mountains are even denser, so to speak, and very few people come there. But this is also a very strong energy vortex. And
okay, any more ones that you can connect with?
Oh well, yes, we would say so. For instance, a way to use these energy vortices would be to adapt them to a type of would use the concept of pilgrimage, and that is not just to say that you need to follow any particular prescription, but it means that if you travel to these places with intentions and you work them into places where you go to confront parts of your inner being, that would be very beneficial to the people who so choose to. And you can use that in a way. So if you want to, for instance, connect to some of the more mental energies, it would not be a bad thing to seek out some of the coastline, for instance, of the around the skærgården of the Göteborg area, which has some of these more mental-like energies. Or if you wanted to actually, yes, try to really connect with your, for instance, creative sides, then going above the polar circle and witnessing the aurora borealis would be a good place to go about it. So these are examples of ways you can work with these energy vortexes to create and amplify your personal experience. And also we would just offer you that for their sheer aesthetic and natural and spiritual splendor and wonder, and alone it is a very wonderful experience to seek out. Yes.
So the aurora borealis, so some vortices, they help bring out whatever is inside you. For example, the vortices in Sedona. But in terms of the aurora borealis, how does that affect you?
Well, yes, it activates a lot of your energetic field. Understand that you are all your body is surrounded by an energetic field, and that is a way to describe it. Another way to describe it is that the energy of the cosmos is constantly shifting into place to create your body and present experience. And this magical creation, this type of energy that is constantly reaching out from the wellspring, the source of everything that is, and feeding it. The aurora borealis is sort of akin to this type of spiritual energetic charge that reaches out and touches your soul. And in those moments, by witnessing the aurora borealis, it is very, very difficult for a human being not to feel first and foremost as a spirit, and then only secondly as a type of bodily creation, that this spirit, that is also a part of the spirit, if that makes sense.
That makes sense, yeah.
Perfect.
So I have a question.
Yes.
In one of the areas where I come from,
yes,
you have the Northern Europe's highest sea cliff, which is called Hogne.
Yeah.
And according to the myths, it was common for witches to meet at the top, and this is 860 meters straight up. And to me, it's a very raw place, and for me, I love that area. It's on an island. And one of the, I think it was Olav the Holy, who climbed the front part of the cliff, which is quite impressive, or extremely impressive. So I was wondering if there is something going on with the vortices or energy in that particular area. It seems to me to be very, very raw, because you have the ocean and you have the small fjords there. So it seems like a particular point.
Yes, we sense that this is, as you describe it, a point where the elements meet, and this makes for a strong natural vortex. And all the things you are pointing to are essentially describing what goes into the creation of man. That is to say, both the rugged sea, the chaotic waters, but also that which is firm, which rises above the rocky soil. And it is interesting that the things you point to is both the legend of witches meeting there, which is this also unbroken female spirit of collective spiritual energy that is still centered around this place, and that you naturally connect to. But the myth of Olaf the Holy, is also the myth of, let us say, that the male individual, or male striving, the need to get to the top in its most positive way. So what the ancient Greeks called arete, or virtue, bestness, the willingness to try to overcome yourself and to reach the peak. And of course, Olaf the Holy is also a figure who spans both, who, as we spoke of with the Viking Age, connects the ancient ways of Scandinavia to the modern or more international ways of Scandinavia.
It seems to me that lately there's a resurgence of the Viking spirit. Well, it seems like there's a resurgence of it, especially in Norway. I don't know how that is in Sweden, or Denmark, but it seems like it's coming up for more and more people who's taking interest and going back into that consciousness in a way. What do you think about that?
We would say it that is most certainly true, and the situation here manifested is in many ways an expression of exactly that, because the spiritual nature of Scandinavia was, we would say, it was never lost, but officially the religious life of the culture was separated from the spiritual impulse of the people. And for a long time, it found other expressions. We would say, for instance, the expressions of social democracy, or just the culture of solidarity among the people in Scandinavia, was a way for that spirit to express itself. But now it is returning to exactly its more not necessarily natural roots, but integrated roots, the places where each individual connects to the energies of the landscape in different ways. And this is very strong in the entire region. You are absolutely right, and it is interesting because it is manifesting itself in different ways. We could say a perspective on the Scandinavian peoples is actually that it was 1,000 years ago one people residing in many different landscapes, and then through a sort of tumultuous history, these people grew into different entities, but what was always at the center of the Scandinavian culture, so to speak, was the individual, the rugged individual, and this individual's own personal relationship to the sparse energies of the land. And when we say sparse, we actually mean it is subtle in many ways. That the landscape is always talking in Scandinavia. The sea is often there roaring, or the mountains are there with their momentous silence, or the deep forests are there with their strange deep calls. And this is what is happening to many people, and you will experience in Scandinavia in the coming decade in particular, but this will be the starting point for a longer process where you will also start to live dramatically differently, and start to live much closer to nature in very much in sustainable homes. And you will build this. Norway is already very close to it, but we'll build this type of culture where, you know, we would say like hyperspace and wildlife go together in ways.
Yeah. That makes sense. This has been a bit of a curiosity for myself. I actually wrote a paper about it many years ago, about how the Norse language disappeared after the Black Death, or especially when the Black Death occurred.
Yes.
It might just be my assumptions, but it seems like that was kind of the turning point in terms of the language. But it's also that was in the late periods of changing from the pagan ways to the Christian way, that especially started with Olaf the Holy. So could you tell me a bit more about that shift from the paganism, from the Norse ways to the Christian? What was actually happening?
Yeah, there were many things going on at that point, because unlike many of the other pagan cultures further south, during the Viking Age, there was actually a type of religious flourishing in Scandinavia where paganism began to understand and define itself in new ways, because it was confronted with Christianity. And there was a great tendency in especially the more northern regions of Scandinavia to develop a new type of also poetic and visual culture that was very proud and self-aware, because it was markedly different from Christianity. But what then happened was, to a degree also, what you point to, the strength of Christianity, which was organization. And the plague figures into this. We know the Black Death, and we will return to the Black Death in a little while, but there were often many minor plagues, and in these instances, Christianity had the upper hand often, because it was a religion of strong organization, and it was a religion that had, for instance, hospital services connected to the monasteries, developed into something that was very efficient. So in a way, when social organization hit once the armies of Scandinavia and we would say almost the early pirate like Vikings gave way to the more organized armies, this level of organizations naturally carried with it a level of Christianization. And that was also always the strange thing in Scandinavia, that Christianity in many ways came to represent culture. And then there was this substratum of folk culture that tried to sort of steer clear of anything that was too overtly or problematically Christian for centuries at least. And you are right, this lived on into the point where the Black Death ravaged the lands to a degree where it was hardly impossible, it was almost impossible to keep any type of coherent oral tradition going. And so people fell back on many of the institutions and that Christianity represented. So these are some of the figures of what was going on, but we would say that there are still, and if you go looking for it instead, we have the channel is of course more aware of the Danish tradition, but if you go looking for it in the Folkeviser, so the songs of the peasant songs that were, and the songs of the people that were carried down and then written down into the 1800s, or of course all the fairy tales are, for instance, these are places where you find this tradition of law still very, very strong. And we would venture to say that if you go out far enough in Norway, you would still find people who keep thunderstones in their houses, or perhaps put food out to satisfy their nissa or vedder or creatures like that. So it is not entirely died out, but we can elaborate or go further into detail if there's some specific point you wish us to explain.
So for me, I was more interested in getting even more on the change of language. That's definitely tied into the Black Death, and the modern Norwegian, for example, is so connected to the Danish, which again was stemming a lot heavily from the ancient Germanic.
Yes,
as far as I understand. So it's to me it's almost like in Scandinavia, if you include Iceland, it's Iceland that has kind of preserved the culture and the language. Well, it's kind of the most Norse country that we have at the moment by a large margin.
and that is, yes, in many ways, that is in many ways certainly true in the language, for instance. But we would say that there are still in the tone and the way you carry yourself a lot of the regional spirit of your ancestors set in the language. But it is, and there were, for instance, for a very, very long time before Danish also broke off and became very strange in its pronunciation compared to to the it's then there was still like an understandable or intelligible way of speaking Scandinavian with each other. But what happened, you are completely right, is again this influence, organizational influence from the south. So the first, we would say, integration of more German or Germanic type of languages was with the whole was with the Hansa era. So there were many yes, for instance, Bern or Stockholm were cities where there were almost a majority of German-speaking populations, and that had a great influence on the Scandinavian languages. And then, of course, came the Reformation and the Danish Bible translation, which became used in Norway too. And this became sort of the way of the book. And this was a language that was very much influenced by Luther and German, and was then pressed down on the Scandinavian populations. But we would say in many ways the final blow was first suffered with television to a degree, because this sorted out many of the dialects. For instance, the channel's own maternal grandfather, who lived in Vendsyssel, the part of Denmark closest to Norway, he spoke a dialect which was very, very far from the Danish that he himself speaks, and was almost often very hard to understand. And there were a lot of these regional dialects that were still spoken, and there are still some in Norway. But the interesting thing is that with this final dying down of the ancient traditions, also comes what you were pointing to before, which is the re-emergence into the landscape, the rediscovery of what is left of the language, the recreation of what is naturally and identically Norwegian or Scandinavian, or yes, a Danish, for instance. And we know that the national history of Norway is of course different from the other countries. But Norway has also seen in your lifetime alone the experience of going from a country that was very confused about its place into the world to a country that is very confident about its place in the world. And this is rubbing off in the creative processes and expressions of the individuals in we would say mostly positive ways.
So I'm going to make a statement, and then we'll see if I'm off on it, or you can correct me.
Yes.
So from my own research, it came to me that the Norse ways, they weren't. So of course there was kings, there was a lot of fighting, but it seemed to me that it was actually the woman that was often the ruling entity in the family.
Yes.
So there was, even though there was kings on the top, it was the women who in many ways were running the daily work, the daily lives, because the men were often around, trading, doing things, or traveling, or pillaging and raping, or whatever we did those 1,000 years ago. So it seems like to me that the Norse ways, the pagan way, was in a way more in harmony with the masculine and the feminine in that sense. And that there was a kind of balance between the chaotic and the structure. There was some structure, but there was also that bit of disorder structure that, at least for me, I don't want too much order. I like to have it open. But then we have the transition to the Christian period, where it seems to me, like also based on what you're saying, it was more structure, more patriarchal way of living, which then translated into the modern times with more materialistic, because the spiritual components seem to have been replaced by materialistic component in many ways here.
Yes, we would say that your statement holds much truth to it. You are, of course, these are all perceptions, and you can turn them around and yes, and play with them and make different perspectives out of them. But we would say that there is a certain depth of truth to them, and it is correct that that what is very characteristic of the Scandinavian landscapes is also that because they are they make for such a meager living, it's hard to eke out what you need to survive. This doesn't offer for a great deal of we would say superfluous or expression of the sexes. So the gender roles have to, in many ways, keep close to each other and close to the ground. This is also expressed in the Scandinavian aesthetics, where you often prefer type of less is more type of design, and also the expression of it has also been noted that silver actually held a higher value than gold in many Viking societies, and this is also this more type of shifting energies where we would say exactly the connection of the male and the female, and the connection of both sexes to what was necessary to perform of tasks at the time. So paradoxically, what you point to is, of course, that the females were able to do more, we would say, classically masculine things, such as be the act as the head of the household, or tend to the farm, or perhaps yes, be the maid of a higher house. So all of these things that were unthinkable in later medieval culture, especially in lands further south, such as France, were possible, and also were possible for a long time in the Christian era. Women in Scandinavia held a different status than they did further down south. And a funny example to counterpoint it is also that, notice there are these types of cross-dressing myths in North mythology. So the myth of we don't remember the exact name of it in English, but where Thor has to dress up as a woman and act as a bride to retrieve his stolen hammer, which is, of course, is a very comical thing, that the masculine of all the gods, the slayer of the giants, is able to dress up as a woman, which is, of course, like a very gender bender thing to do for a manly man such as Thor. So these are some of the perspectives where you also see this readiness to shift, and you are completely right that this we would tie it again to this higher degree of organization. So the disenfranchisement of women in Scandinavia also really didn't take off seriously till after the Reformation in 1536, at least that was in the year in Denmark, where women were completely disenfranchised, and you stopped having, for instance, nunneries, you stopped having female saints, you stopped having the image of the Virgin Mother. But still, there was in Scandinavian culture a tendency to include women. And if you think of, for instance, we don't know if you went through these things in school, but in Holberg's Jeppe på Bjerget, there's the image of Nille, the terrible wife, who really is the reason that the joke is that she's one of the reasons that Jeppe is a drunkard, but she's also this very, very strong woman. And of course, in Ibsen's A Doll's House, or Dogehjem, is the image of Nora, which was again Scandinavian women reasserting themselves, and this had a massive influence on the perceptions of women in modern society all over the world. So there is still some of these gender patterns, but it is true that that the Scandinavians were offered materiality in exchange for spirituality, and for many centuries you took this deal because to have a better material existence seemed such a high priority, because life was really, really hard in these regions up until 2 generations ago, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense. And anything else coming to you?
Oh,
it's a big topic.
Yes, it is a very big topic. We would say that that now, for instance, in Scandinavia has become a place for many souls where many souls that choose to incarnate and female in this generation have the experience, or have the opportunity to have the experience of radical freedom. So if you in Scandinavia should feel that you are surrounded by Amazons sometimes, or women who seem to also be struggling with how to live out a life as a modern woman and existence, this is very much because these females living in Scandinavia, of course, also in other places, but in Scandinavia it's very concentrated, have taken upon themselves also to explore the theme of what it is to be a free human woman and to find a way of existing that is healthy and sustainable and in accordance with her own spiritual values and nature. And this is very much what is taking place. So we could, for instance, say that to the men of Scandinavia who might sometimes feel like this is a different or a little difficult to relate to, then you just need to chill and know that everything is on the right path, and it is a good thing that you are also pursuing your own creative endeavors.
So how do you see the Scandinavian region developing now in this coming future? So there's a lot of changes coming, it seems to me.
Yes, there certainly are. We see, of course, there are shifting timelines, but the timelines that are relevant for the communication taking place between these two individuals and the people listening will be one where you will experience Scandinavia becoming a sort of we wouldn't say experiment, but we would say almost a type of showcasing of social organization. The interesting part, what is also going on at your planet at present with the coronavirus scare, is the turn from radical individualism into the obvious necessity for collectivism to a degree, and the need to balance these things out. And these things have, to a much higher degree, been done successfully in Scandinavia than in other places. So in Scandinavia, we see this process going further. So there will become experiments with what you may understand as now at present as UBI, a universal basic income. That is not to say that you pay off the general population with a general amount, but that is to say that you will be experimenting with creating societies where there's generally no sense of lack, and where you empower people to the degree that you simply try to give them the basic resources. So that will be one of the experiences. We also see that the energy industry will be shifting, and you will become, we see on any of the relevant timelines that Scandinavian will be completely reliable on renewable energy in the year 44 we're getting for some reason, but we want to say 14 is as 234 perhaps actually. So this is it's a shift that's taking place rapidly, very soon. Also, the type of Scandinavian free spirit will become different. So you will see these spiritual experiments becoming more and more open. For instance, ayahuasca retreats are becoming more common in Denmark, and also attracting people from abroad. And this type of, again, the combination of, we would say, neo-indigenous culture with sleek living and technological capabilities are some of the things that will be developed further. We also know we were talking about the project of houses in our previous session, and there was and this is also a place where we see in the development of living in a revolution of how to live sustainably, not only resource-wise but also from an inner perspective, will be a place where individuals such as yourself, and we see you yourself in particular, will end up contributing with a lot of good to the collective of the race on the planet.
Sounds fascinating. So I have another question there. It might be a bit off topic, but it's
you're most welcome.
In a way, it's related. So, for example, Norway had a long tradition of farming, especially sheep.
Yes.
But now, so it was normal, like in many other countries where you have the small holding, a small farm that's providing for the entire family.
Yes.
But there's been a gradual closing down of these small farms because it wasn't sustainable. And so a lot of these lands, pastures, they're getting claimed back by nature. And when we're seeing today how dependent we are on oil, but for example, the hemp plant can provide everything that the oil is doing. And you see Norway with this, enormous available land, and according to my research, has perfect climate to grow hemp.
Yes.
So it seems to me like there's also something shifting there at some point soon now. What do you think about that?
We completely agree. So the type of economy you will see, and it's interesting because as far as there were also hemp seeds in the Oseberg ship, we believe. So this is a tradition that goes back very far in the Scandinavian regions. I know that shipfaring, which is, of course is a speciality of especially the Norwegians and the Danes, is very much connected to the cultivation of hemp, because you get all the ropes and trimmings and sails. You need to actually cultivate hemp to get that. And so you are completely right that the type of sativas that grow in the Scandinavian environment and grow in Norway are very, very sturdy and can be used for very, very sturdy and sustainable building materials and materials for oils and such things. But we would envision that these type of, so there is both the process of reclaiming and of the land, and it will be a priority for people in the future in general. But Scandinavia will be one of the first places where you will see this, to let more and more of the previously cultivated land also return to the wild. But this does not mean that the small holding will also return. So you can, for instance, imagine a person who might have cultivate some of their own plants, or maybe have maybe growing microgreens or different types of modern types of cultivation, and also having a few animals, or maybe having a production of high quality wool, so to speak, but also having a type of employment where they are linked up to the modern information economy and are performing some tasks or services through their computer or email, or types of modern communication and technology that will arise, and that is also a different dimension that, for instance, the Scandinavian landscape, and we are speaking of Norway in particular, where there is so much. It is so, logistics are so difficult. They will also be greatly benefited by the changes and developments in communication technology. So you will see, once VR really takes off, that you will be able to conduct more and more of the work you now consider as bound to a specific location anywhere you wish to. And this is also a revelation that is tied to what is going on the planet with the crisis now, because so many are discovering that it is possible to be productive in ways that weren't connected to the regular modes of production that have been disrupted now.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is might be a bit of a backtrack, but you see, in terms of the Norse language, so we still have the Icelandic language.
Yes.
Do you think there's going to be a bit of a resurgence or a coming back?
Yes, to some extent, you will probably like, of course, there will probably never grow communities in there are infinite timelines, so never say never, but in Norway, where people will start to speak the type of Icelandic that you can find in the Edda, for instance, that you cultivate that as a artificial language that, for instance, was done with Hebrew in the 1800s, where people revived a written language to be a spoken language, which has happened sometimes. But what will happen is that there will be a resurgence, which is, for instance, happening in the Scandinavian music scene, with the return to the more pagan musical roots, and where the languages are, yes, both the regional languages, but also often Old Norse is used. And what will happen is that in many of these communities, Old Norse will become more and more of a type of liturgical language. So in the way that Sanskrit is used in India, or the way that Latin is used in Catholic tradition, then you will experience that Old Norse will also be something that a lot of people interested in the subject, and that it will be from all over the planet, but of course from Scandinavia in particular, who will learn themselves, for instance, to recite parts of or the Völuspá, or different type of classic Edda verses. So there will be a type of resurgence, and you might also experience, for instance, in Nordic spirituality, the return to this, that certain words and concepts, like for instance the concept of Seder or plant magic, will return to prominence in the coming years. So we would console you in that sense that the Scandinavian languages are not dying out, and there is a sort of, also the literary scene is very strong in Norway, and this is a way where the culture keeps reinforcing and rediscovering and exploring its language, and this is going on in Norway. So do not fear that English will become the new standard bearer.
I wouldn't mind that either. Yeah, thank you so much. Any last messages to our upcoming listeners?
We would let you know that yes, to connect to, we are very, very close to you in vibration, and so it would actually also be possible for you to, especially in these star bright nights of the spring, to go out and gaze in, we would say, the direction of, yes, what is it we are trying to, okay, this is me speaking the channel. What is it they're trying to communicate? They're saying, if you clear your mind and use the vibration of the hum, do this for 10 minutes, then go out on a star bright night and find the constellation of the Pleiades, and you will notice something in the way we gleam at you that will hold some information you can access. These star type informations that are coming down are very accessible to you now, for those of you that want it. And we are there also with practical advice. So do not hesitate to ask us, for instance, if you feel you are running low on money, or you wish you could dispose of your time or something. The Pleiadians is a good place to consult, because we have seated you and we know all the problems you went through, and we have surpassed them. So we would like you to simply let you know that you are loved and that help is ready whenever you want it.
Would there be any symbols you can focus on as well?
Oh, yes, that's beautiful. We would say, if you imagine the squiggly line, almost a serpent. So if you imagine a line going down here, and then it starts swaying in bows, like this, and then connects down again to that. That would be a place. And then envision that a ring or a circle connects these or surrounds the bows. So we know it's, if you can imagine it, yes, imagine the proceeding, the wave within the circle would be the easiest way to perceive of what we are communicating now. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I wrote down something or attempted.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you so
I really
much
enjoyed that.
for this beautiful co-creation. Thank you so much. We will see each other another time, and we are always ready with love for you wherever you are. Thank you for now, and goodbye.
Bye.
Hi, Hogne.
Hey.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was my impression is there was a lot of interesting information coming up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's excellent. Most excellent.
It's going to be a good video for YouTube.
Oh yeah. I'm looking very much forward to hearing it, and I think like there might be, we might know some other Northerners who might be interested in what's going on with the. And I remember like the images of the energy vortices and Svalbard and everything. That was very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting with the chakras are reversed in the sense of the Scandinavia, the ridge of the mountain. That was very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I found that very interesting too. But it sort of makes sense to the way I've perceived also the energy down here compared to what's going on further north, and like I live pretty south in Jutland, so it's when you go further south, it sort of shifts to that very European energy, and things become like, okay, a lot of people live here and a lot goes on, and then it gets quieter and quieter the more north you get, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so if you want to do some more recording another day, I'm happy to interview you or ask questions or whatever, if you also have any specific topics you want.
Oh, that's perfect, man. I'm really
happy to help.
Okay, I'm so happy because it's I think it's a big help. Like we get a lot of interesting things explored, and it's you ask excellent questions. So like, and the better the questions, like the better the answers, right? So that's perfect. And as you notice, like right now I'm groggy, but I'm sure like I would love to. I would love to, and we'll explore some more. So So I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you then, and I hope the sun will also visit. Are you in Switzerland or Norway right now?
Switzerland.
Oh, you're in Switzerland.
18 degrees outside.
Really? Okay. So outside with you then? Yes. That sounds lovely.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for now.
Bye.
Bye.